The Emerald Tablet, Chapter 18, One Day in Bangkok. At 7:30 on Saturday morning they sat at a table in the Dymos Diner 3 doors down from the Silver Touch. Their table was at the back of the restaurant, so the Panther wouldn't see them when he passed by. Sure enough, at 10 minutes to 8, Pantheros Pavlos came walking down Wu Wei and entered Morpheus's shop. Like they'd planned, they waited in the restaurant until a few minutes after 8 and then walked to the shop. As expected, the door was locked. However, Gary had managed to obtain a single hair from Morpheus during the past week. Using the chemistry lab back at school, he'd created a thin glove for Andy to wear containing Morpheus's DNA sequence. Andy placed his hand on the access panel and the door slid open. "Awesome," Andy said. "I'm sure glad someone's good at science." Gary smiled. "Glad I could help." "Just think what trouble we could get into if we had samples of all our teachers' DNA," Andy said. His eyes got a faraway look, as if he was dreaming of all the possibilities. "I'm afraid to think of that," Iva said. She hadn't wanted to clone the DNA signature, but couldn't come up with any better way to get into the locked shop. They entered and quickly shut and locked the door. The teleporter was in the back of the store, the pad still glowing. Typing in the access code Heidi had obtained, the teleporter came out of standby. Benjamin, Gary, and Iva stepped forward and then disappeared. In light speed, they stood in an empty back alley next to a large apartment building. Televisions could be heard from the high windows. A baby cried, a dog barked. Though they had only been in Lemuria for a matter of weeks, Benjamin couldn't believe how strange it felt to be back in what he'd considered to be the normal world for so many years. Teleporter protocol dictated that upon arriving at public teleporter locations in non-Lemurian destinations, the arrivers quickly vacate the area. The teleporters themselves were designed to only allow arrivals and departures when humans were not around, scanning constantly for body heat and DNA, and shifting locations if needed. Benjamin, Gary, and Iva hurried from the alley and walked about a half a block before stopping to look around. Benjamin pulled out the paper map of the city of Bangkok he'd printed before they left. He looked up, looked around, and then pointed to the map. "Based on our surroundings and the position of the sun in the sky, I think we are here." He pointed about 1 mile southeast of the arena, circled in red, where the Bangkok Chess Open was being held. "We need to go here." He pointed due west about 1.5 miles. "Gary, do you have your map?" Benjamin asked. Gary nodded. "I'll let you know when I get to the Open, and I'll keep you posted on the progress of the chess matches." Morpheus mentioned he was scheduled to play in one of the first ones, Gary said. "Let us know if anything goes wrong," Iva said. She and Benjamin set off to the west. Gary started walking northwest. Within a block, they could no longer see each other. Benjamin and Iva saw the Grand Palace long before they actually arrived. Large golden spires rose up in the air higher than any of the surrounding buildings. They quickened their pace and soon reached the main gate where they entered the grounds of the Grand Palace. "Okay, we're here," Benjamin thought to Gary. He looked at his watch. It was 8:40. "Yeah, I'm here too. The tournament's going to get started soon, and Morpheus is in the first group of players, so he'll be starting right at 9. But since he'll never lose, he'll probably play all day," Gary replied. Iva directed her thoughts to both of them. "I can already sense the key somewhere close by. It's a really strong telemagnifier. I don't think finding it'll be a problem." "Oh, wow, you guys won't believe who just got here," Gary thought, and even across the distance Benjamin sensed Gary's excitement through the alliance bond. "Asia Philippa," Benjamin guessed. "No, it's Alexander Chervenka, the chess champion from last year's tournament. He's fantastic. I watched him win last year on TV. I hope I get to see him play this year," Gary thought. "Okay, well, have fun, and let us know what's going on with Morpheus," Benjamin replied. "Oh yeah, I will," Gary thought, distraction already evident in his response. Benjamin and Iva walked as normally as they possibly could, but went straight to the temple of the Emerald Buddha. Located just off the left as they entered, it was drawing more tourists than any other destination in the entire palace complex. 2 large demon statues stood guard over the temple area. "You think they were from Atlantis?" Benjamin said to Iva, gesturing to the large, frightening figures. "Maybe Lemuria," she joked back. "Aren't they supposedly guarding this place?" "Well, even if they are good guys, I wouldn't want to run into them in a dark alley," Benjamin said. The temple of the Emerald Buddha looked like it had been dipped in gold and then decorated with gems. Benjamin wasn't positive the first key of Shambhala was located inside the actual temple, but he figured it was as good a place to start as any to start. "Hey, how's it going there?" Heidi's voice said in his head. It took him by surprise. "Oh, pretty good," he thought back. We just reached the temple, and Morpheus should be starting to play any minute now. I just thought I'd check in. No activity here, she thought back. Morpheus has some pretty cool new things, though. Andy found some telekinesis practice set that he won't stop using. He keeps talking about his need to beat you and Ryan Jordan. You guys are so competitive. Well, let me know when you get the key. Like the rest of the tourists, they took off their shoes outside and entered the temple. Set deep inside, high up on display, was the green statue of Buddha. Iva stopped and stared. It's breathtaking, she said, to no one in particular. Benjamin wasn't nearly so awestruck. Come on, he said, nudging her. Can you tell where the key is? He whispered. We need to hurry. Iva stared for another moment and then shook herself out of her stupor. It's somewhere very close by. I am almost certain it's in this building. She looked around. Benjamin followed her gaze as she looked around. Most of the tourists were watching them. I think we'd better follow the crowd and kneel down to pray, she said. We're already standing out. Benjamin grumbled but dropped to his knees beside her. Iva bowed her head low to the ground, and Benjamin did his best to mimic her. I don't know how to pray to Buddha, he said. Well, you don't really have to, Iva said. Just make it look like you're trying. People are starting to stare at us. They remained in the prostrate position for a minute before Iva spoke. I can sense someone of great power placing the key somewhere in here to hide it. I can almost see it happening. She grasped her emelite pendant and closed her eyes, trying to keep her head toward the ground. Just then Gary's voice came quickly into Benjamin's mind. Benjamin, I don't know what happened, but Morpheus lost, and they're leaving. He lost! I don't know how it could have happened. He lost? They're leaving? Now? Are you sure? Benjamin asked. Positive. He sat down to play, but in no time at all his opponent had him cornered. After the checkmate he looked really upset, worried. He talked to the panther, and the two of them left and headed to the teleporter. Gary sounded panicked, even through telepathy. I don't think we can make it back before them. No, we can't, Benjamin said. We don't even have the key yet. Quietly he said to Iva, Do you know where it is yet? Don't hurry me, she hissed. You're making me lose my focus. Okay, Benjamin thought to Gary. Since we already missed our window, I'll talk to Heidi and let her know they need to get out of the shop. We'll just have to see if they can distract Morpheus and the panther when we're ready to return. So what should I do? Gary asked. Well, I guess just stay and watch the tournament for a while, Benjamin told him. I'll let you know when we get it. Benjamin looked over to get an update from Iva, but decided against it when she grabbed her pendant again and reclosed her eyes. So instead, he connected to Heidi. Heidi, he thought. Hey, Benjamin, how's it going? She replied without missing a beat. You guys have to get out of the shop. They're heading back. Already? She asked. Yeah, already. I'll explain it later. Just get Andy and get out of the shop. Benjamin severed the link with Heidi and looked back over at Iva. She hadn't moved. He did his best not to get impatient, but what was taking her so long? His knees were starting to hurt, badly. Wasn't she supposed to be good at this telegnosis stuff? Of course, he had no idea where the key was. It could be 3 inches from his nose, for all he knew. Do you want the good news or the bad news first? Iva said at last. How about the good news? Benjamin said. Well, I know where the key is, she said. It's about time, he said. She glared at him. So where is it? Benjamin asked, ignoring her glare. Well, that's the bad news, Iva said. Benjamin looked at her and raised an eyebrow. It's in a secret compartment hidden directly under the Emerald Buddha, Iva said. Under the Buddha? Benjamin asked. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure, Iva said. Of course I'm sure. Okay, fine, Benjamin said. So how do we get it out? Well, I thought you could figure that out, Iva said. Do you think anyone would stop me if I climbed up onto the platform and lifted the statue up? Benjamin asked Iva. Probably only the entire palace guard, Iva replied. Yeah, I thought so, Benjamin said. I guess we need a different plan, right? Right, Iva said. They continued kneeling while Benjamin tried to devise some way to get to the secret compartment without being seen. It was probably only the discomfort of kneeling for so long which made Benjamin think of a brilliant idea. I think I have it, he said. I'm listening, Iva said. How good do you think you are at telekinesis? Benjamin asked her. Iva groaned. I mean, I know you're better than Heidi and Gary, that's for sure. You don't expect me to lift that thing, do you? Iva asked. No, Benjamin said. I'll lift it up, and while everyone is watching the Buddha, you open the secret compartment underneath and get the key out. Then I'll set the Buddha down, we'll leave, and no one will even know anything is missing. Won't people wonder why the Buddha is levitating? Iva asked. They can attribute it to a religious miracle, or good karma, or dogma, or something, Benjamin said. But do you think we're really supposed to do something like that? Iva asked. I mean, it seems to go against everything we're being taught. Using our gifts blatantly? Misleading humans? Yeah, well, we're not even supposed to be here in the first place, Benjamin said, so even if someone did find out, they wouldn't be able to trace it back to us. Iva sighed. Okay, when I get the key out, where should I put it? She asked. Just put it somewhere out of sight where we can easily retrieve it by hand, Benjamin answered. Are you ready? Iva nodded. Here goes nothing, Benjamin said. He put his head to the ground, but angled it slightly so he could see the brilliant emerald Buddha. The room was quiet, most of the tourists praying to the icon. Suddenly, magically, the Buddha lifted up in the air. A gasp escaped from the crowd. The Buddha rose up higher, now almost 6 inches off the pedestal on which it had rested. Benjamin continued to lift it higher. The crowd stared at the statue, then in unison dropped their heads to the ground in humility. Benjamin heard excited whispers, but had no idea what anyone was saying in the unfamiliar language. The Buddha was heavy, actually much heavier than he would have thought. Silently, he found himself wishing Andy were here. Benjamin hated to admit it, but sometimes he actually did think Andy was better at telekinesis. Of course, if Andy were here, he'd probably be twirling the Buddha right now. I think it's high enough, he said silently to Iva. Get the key out. I'll keep it up here. Iva concentrated on the pedestal. Nothing happened. Benjamin didn't want to focus too much on the area, instead trying to keep his attention on the large Buddha. He didn't want to be responsible for dropping and smashing Thailand's most precious artifact. What's taking so long? He thought to Iva. I can't seem to get the compartment open, she said. I know it's there, it just won't open. New tourists kept entering the room. Quickly, it was getting more and more crowded. Just hurry, Benjamin said. Another 20 seconds passed, but Iva had no luck. I just can't open it, she said. You're going to have to try. I can't do that and hold this thing, Benjamin said. Oh, sure you can, Iva said encouragingly. No, Benjamin said. You're going to have to take it. I don't think that's a good idea, Iva said. What if I drop it? You won't drop it, Benjamin said, but I'll back you up just in case. Promise? Iva asked. Yes, I promise, Benjamin replied. Now just slowly take over holding the Buddha in the air. It's kind of heavy, so take your time. Iva started to hold the Buddha with her mind. Benjamin began to let up on his control of the statue. So far, so good. You almost have the whole thing, Benjamin said. Here's the last bit. He let go of the Buddha completely. It dropped 6 inches, wobbled violently, then held steady. The crowd gasped. Apparently everyone was watching, though their heads were bowed to the ground. The Buddha held firm. Iva didn't attempt to lift it back up to its previous position. Benjamin started concentrating on the pedestal. He easily found the compartment and slid open the lid. With his mind, he found exactly what he wanted inside. He lifted the key out of the secret area, closing the lid behind it. He moved the key behind the pedestal and within 10 seconds lifted the Buddha from Iva's mind. You have it? She asked. Yes, I have it, Benjamin replied. I'm going to set the Buddha back on the pedestal. He gently but promptly placed the Buddha back down without even a sound. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. 3 palace guards entered the chamber just as the statue settled. First, one of them spoke something in the same language Benjamin couldn't understand. Everyone stood up. Whispers turned to wild talk. The guard followed by repeating the message in English. Everyone must leave the temple, the guard said. The temple of the Emerald Buddha is now closed and will remain so indefinitely. Exit the way you came in. Benjamin stood up and tried to put on his best "I wonder what's going on" look. Iva tried to do the same, but didn't look nearly convincing enough to Benjamin. Where's the key? She hissed in his mind. Benjamin didn't answer her question. Let's go get our shoes on, he said. It's time to go. But where did you put it? She persisted. The guard who had spoken looked at them and narrowed his eyes. I agree, Iva, Benjamin said in his normal voice. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I can't wait to tell Mom and Dad about it. He silently added, play along. Iva paused for only a moment, hardly missing a beat. I wonder if anything like that has ever happened before, she asked. The guard overheard the question. No, nothing like this has ever happened before. We must investigate the matter fully, he replied with a thick accent. Now please proceed to the exit and do not forget to retrieve your shoes before leaving. Thank you for the reminder, Benjamin said. They exited through the main entrance and walked over to the racks holding their shoes. Benjamin handed Iva her shoes, then picked his up off the rack. He reached into his right shoe, pulled out a small green, neatly carved stone, winked at Iva, and placed the stone in his pocket. Clever, Benjamin, she said. Very, very clever.